I'd like to introduce you to Craig Hall today. Craig was one of Australia's first life coaches, starting his practice in 2000 in Sydney. As a pioneer in what is now widely acknowledged to be the most important element of adult education, Craig has built a life coaching business that has supported hundreds of clients to grow as individuals, including CEOs and leaders in the BRW list. Craig often is contracted by corporations to improve work culture. Please welcome Craig Hall.
Thank you very much, Craig, for coming on to the show and having a chat with me. I've obviously known you for quite a long time now. We worked together whilst I was at the grounds, and I don't actually remember how I got in touch with you, but through some connection or
referral of some kind, I'm sure,
or some kind, and then we got chatting.
Some dodgy referral.
Yeah, probably from another head case like me. So we got chatting, and obviously we started working together through on a professional level, and then later on we started working on a more personal level and with my relationship as well. So, you started your practice in 2000, which was a long time ago. Retrospectively, because it is 20 years ago now.
It is, mate, yeah.
Which seems weird, considering that was the year that held the Olympics. And you can still see the blue marathon lines from time to time on, when you're driving certain parts of Sydney. Anyway, so you started your practice 2000, and, you're what you call yourself a life coach, right? And you essentially work with people on how to better, their lives. And back then, I feel like there would have been not that many people in that field, not as prominent as now, anyways. And you've obviously worked with, big companies like Mars and the Red Balloon Group. Some of them I can't say because of confidentiality. But you do work with a lot of, CEOs that's been on the, on the prominent BRW rich lists. And how did you get into this line of work?
Good question, Jack. I never planned on becoming a coach, actually.
What did you actually want to be when you were young?
Oh, I was always into property. So I had an interest in refurbing and flipping property, doing up property.
Sure.
That was sort of my natural happy place.
Uh-huh.
But coaching came about as a result of working on myself, actually.
So why did you work on yourself?
A good question as well, right? It was really life that got me to sort of look in the mirror and challenge myself on who I was, what I stood for, what I believed.
Yeah.
And that outcome led to me then wanting to share what I'd sort of uncovered for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started coaching 20 years ago, I didn't actually have a methodology that was borrowed or learnt through a formal education. It was actually something I created as a result of my own work on self.
Your own personal struggles.
Absolutely.
Obviously, I know this story, but would you mind sharing that with some of the people that are listening? Because I think you're definitely not a unique case in that sense. Lots of people would have gone through similar things, but obviously not in the exact circumstances. And would you say that was, one of the core factors that, led you to do what you do today?
It is the core factor. The nature of how my life started and where it eventually went led to an outcome that had me sort of be very challenged personally, and that was as a result of loss. And I think if you've gone through significant loss in life, that either can be an opportunity for breakdown or breakthrough. It was a bit of this and a bit of that, in truth. It wasn't sort of finding the breakthrough straight away. So the backstory to that is, and it sounds like a sad story, this story, but in actual fact, it's the catalyst for why I do what I do. So there's a lot of is the opposite in that. It's both joyful and sad in as much that it's served my personal growth and it's contributed to others. So my life started idyllic, in a very idyllic setting, raised by beautiful parents, 6 kids. They love children, obviously, love family. And they really intended to give us the best, chances in life, lots of love and support. Mum and Dad were amazing as a couple, still are. Love each other. I never saw them argue, actually.
Yeah, right.
Like, people were really committed to each other, best friends. And in that environment, I was the third boy. So 3 boys, 3 girls.
Wow.
Brady
Big
Bunch,
family.
quite literally.
Yeah.
And I would consider myself sort of the glue in that situation. I was very much in the middle of all those relationships.
Sure.
Yeah. And despite the idyllic setting, it was unusual in as much that I was raised in a cult, if you like. I would describe it as a cult. Some people wouldn't. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, which is a unique religion and very strict. It's not sort of traditional sort of modern day religion. It's very sort of attached to old beliefs, structures. And it meant that I was raised in a very isolated world in as much that family and our community were effectively my only form of socializing and connection and relationship. Yeah.
This was obviously in Australia.
It was in Australia, in a little country town called Hamilton outside of Melbourne. So another, dynamic to that experience being it wasn't only isolated in our community, but isolated in the fact that it was a small country town as well. And as much as that was idyllic, and I completely embraced it and didn't know any better because I was raised in it, I was, challenged by my personal truths and the truths that I was given as a child and as a teenager adult. And my personal truth was I was gay. And that's just not a good combination when you're a Jehovah's Witness and a gay man, right?
Yeah.
And despite every effort that I did to live into the expectations of the people that had raised me, I couldn't ultimately fulfill on those expectations and came out to my family. And as a consequence, they withdrew from my life completely, didn't want anything more to do with me. And so that was the birthplace, if you like, of the loss and the sadness and the grief and the challenges, the breakdown. But equally, it was the moment that with time and sitting with that breakdown that I had the opportunity to really start looking within at self.
When did you realize that you were gay?
I think there was always a knowing. If I look back, really authentically, if I look back, there's probably a truth there always. But I only got that when I was an adult. Like it came to light, realizing first sexual experience, married.
Yeah, wow.
Right.
I didn't know that.
No, got married. And that was my first sexual encounter as a result of getting married. It was only once I sort of connected and related to my own sexuality that I got a sense of possibly that I was actually not straight.
So, I mean, that must have been a pretty big burden in your own mind because of your upbringing and your family. So, in that respect, what were you going through? Like what was going through in your mind when you realized, hey, this marriage is not for me, and how the fuck am I going to tell my parents and my family, especially being in the situation that you were in?
Well, I admittedly I attempted to make sure I didn't tell them.
Sure.
Found every way not to share that, to navigate their questions or inquiry into my personal life in a way that sort of put doors up or protection around me so I wouldn't have to admit the truth.
So you obviously knew that your parents were not going to be okay with that.
Absolutely, yeah. So in fact, my sister had come out before me. So I knew what had happened for her.
Right.
So she'd come out about 2 years before I did. And so the knowing of how they treated her was sort of eventually I knew going to be the same outcome for myself.
So there was a lot of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Real hesitancy on actually going, this is the truth, right? Because of the consequences that would come with that. But eventually it was just, there was no room but the truth to be shared. The questions were too too obvious, too direct.
Sure.
That I eventually went, I've just got to be authentic and call it out.
What made you say, I have to do this? Or not just go, hey, I'm running away?
I did a bit of running away in attempts and context. I shifted to Sydney to get away from that situation and the light being put on me. I think it was just that knowing that eventually, if I wanted to be good with self on some level, on a really deep level, I knew that I had to be authentic about who I was. Yeah? I think that became more evident with time that I knew that, but on a subconscious level, I just knew I had to say the truth and get it said, if you like.
Yeah, yeah. And what did happen with your sister that made that much more harder to tell to come out?
Well, knowing what had happened to her, I guess, because there was evidence of how they treated her,
right.
which was like
outcast her.
Yeah, absolutely. So they wouldn't speak to her anymore. We removed from the family. I attempted to sort of bring her back into the fold and make sure that family treated her differently, but to no avail. So I knew what the outcome was going to be for me as well. And in fact, I knew it'd be harder on me because in the nature of the religion I was raised in, men have a lot more responsibility. Yeah. So as a consequence, the expectations were much greater on who I was and what I should do and become. So I figured that'd be tougher on me, which they were. So that was the hesitancy. And family matters, right?
Absolutely.
Well, particularly the way I was raised, all those relationships really mattered.
So what was the outcome, after you came out to your parents and your family and your community for that matter?
Yeah, absolutely. Because everyone I knew was of the same faith, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the outcome was broken, actually. I didn't know what to do, who to be, where to go. I was alone. I was living in Sydney. I was very isolated. So it was a time of darkness, a time that I didn't actually know I'd get through.
Yeah.
It was really tough. Yeah. But it was the sitting in that and not hiding from that emotional, breakdown, if you like, that actually led to me finding some sort of quietness. That was the beginning of a different conversation for myself about looking within.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that because a lot of people would hide and a lot of people would deal with it completely differently from how you dealt with it, which is not to hide, What went through your mind when you said, no, I can't hide from this, I have to face it, rather than to just go into your shell and say, I'm depressed, I've lost my community, I've lost my family, I've lost my friends. Because that's pretty rough, as a young man to all of a sudden cut off from everything and everyone you knew.
So what was the
catalyst for you to face face that rather than to hide or to deal with it another way?
I have had this knowing that I had a couple of options, right?
Sure.
It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, turn into the absolute, gay man, if you like. Sit in the darkness and not get out of it, or find a way to reconcile myself. Yeah. Could be a better story for all of us. I'd chosen drugs, sex, and rock and roll, but I didn't. And I really attempted just to find the reason and the understanding and the lessons of why I was where I was, and what could I get from this situation. And I don't know if there was a particular catalyst. It was just this inner stubbornness or determination, like a real drive of, I can't just stay here. I have to lift myself up, which I think was the way I'm built, not to sort of, get sort of pushed over by life. That stubbornness sort of won over, I think.
And so you began this journey of, a little bit of self-discovery and a little bit of moving on. What did you encounter that for yourself that you didn't realize, when you started doing this?
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I describe what I went through as the flip. So what happened for me was everything I knew hadn't worked, if you like, according to the expectations of others and life. I hadn't, created the outcome of what everyone else expected from me, nor even for myself, actually. So it was the need to get answers to why is my life looking the way it is that had me begin to look at the fundamentals of what I believe, what I knew, what we'd agreed to. So sort of came up with this rule that applied to the flip. Yeah, if you want an extraordinary life, it doesn't take being ordinary.
Yeah.
And so, which I've shared with you before, which is this sense of everything I'd got experienced to that moment seemed pretty ordinary, even less than ordinary. And if I wanted to create a better result, I probably needed a new way of thinking. I needed to look at things from a different perspective. And so I started internalizing everything I knew and going, okay, if that didn't work, what's the opposite to that piece? Of flipping it, doing a 180 on it and going, what's a different answer to, emotional health and emotional self-responsibility, for example. Yeah. And so it was that inquiry that opened up a brand new way of looking at life, at looking at myself. And that's where I guess the breakthrough started.
Yeah, because you get brought up to a certain age, and what you learn through your formative years to when you're a young adult, you're pretty much set. Of course, people can change themselves, but the internal beliefs, the way you react to things, the way you deal with emotions, anger, happiness, sadness, loss, grief, whatever it may be. To a lot of people, that's been set. And so for you to be challenged and have everything ripped away from you and or essentially start again, that must have been, an extraordinarily hard time for you.
It was, but there was almost more light than there was darkness in actually doing that inquiry.
Yeah.
Because by virtue of opening myself up, the answers started arriving that I was surprised by, that led me to almost get excited by possibility of what else didn't I know yet. Yeah. And I think
sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, true, right? and being stripped back that much, there isn't much room for anything else from my place but rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as much as that initial darkness and challenge and grief, which is still true, right? I still carry that loss. It's not like it's gone.
Yeah.
It's the possibility of gaining something from that breakdown and turning it into something that would heal and support me personally.
Yeah.
Became this sort of driving force that was really powerful.
And so when did you know you were going to be okay?
I still sometimes wonder if I am, Jack. The okayness came through pretty quickly once I took ownership of my emotions. Yeah, that I wasn't scared or hiding from or running from those feelings. Honoring just where I was at. So that sense of physical, mental, and emotional self-responsibility, and really getting connected and embracing the emotions that I was carrying.
Yeah,
was the okayness. Yeah, that grief isn't bad. Sadness isn't wrong, that all emotions are beautiful. They're there for a reason. That was the quietness that sat in and the peacefulness that turned up. So the okayness arrived effectively in embracing that, accepting that.
Yeah. So you obviously then decided that you wanted to help others. Is that through this whole process of becoming okay with what happened?
Yeah, and creating a methodology.
Yeah. So tell me about that.
So I guess, firstly, I don't help others.
Mm.
I think people help themselves.
Yes, okay.
I consider myself an educator. And my coaching model is all about shifting people's perspective, giving them new methodology, tools that will assist them to achieve the breakthrough they're looking for themselves. I don't design that, they do effectively. And it was, that methodology was created through that deep inquiry into myself and that flip methodology, if you like, the concept of really looking at life from a different perspective. I'm still doing it every day. I don't stop doing that. Always inquiring into, is there a better answer to the way we live, the way we think? And so it was almost sharing that sort of conversation with others in social settings. People go, are you a counselor or a therapist? I go, no. And that got so loud, I thought maybe there's something in that. such a consistent sort of thing in life for a period of time that I went, maybe I should listen to this. Yeah. And the coaching model was just arriving in, well, from my understanding, it could have been earlier, but it was, starting in the US. I'd heard about it. I started checking with what it was about, what it was, its intention was. And I could really relate to that concept of not getting stuck in the story, getting a breakthrough in your life by using the story for growth.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I just sort of put my hand up going, oh, I think I can do this. I think I've got the tools. I've created this methodology. It's worked on me. I just want to share it. So I told my best friend at the time, I think I want to do this thing.
Yeah.
And they went, that sounds like you. Perfect. Referred a client into me in the same week.
Yeah.
Which was my first client. And I've never looked back. So it's always just been this gradual referral system of, I started with saying so, and it's turned into a business that I'm really blessed to be part of.
So, when you first started, let's go back a little bit, because you said to, the first time I met you, you said a really great quote to me. And I think this is a quote that you live by. And you said, you're the director and producer of your own. So in that sense, you became the director and producer in your own, to move past the pain of loss and the pain of, alienation. So did you have any help along the way? Like, did you read books? Did you, because it's quite, for people who aren't, who haven't done any work on themselves in terms of mental health work, it's quite difficult to think things from another perspective, right? To look at things differently as how you've always looked at it. So because you were kind of in this really unique situation where everything you knew had to be different to what you are now. So you had to look at things differently. But for people who don't know what different is, is there a way that they can start by reading something? Did you read? Did you learn from someone or someone?
I actually didn't for ages. Because I had lost so many people I loved, I didn't entrust myself to a therapist or a counselor or anyone. Actually, I was a bit too independent and sitting in my own stuff to actually do that. Reading didn't happen for a long time. It was sort of that personal inquiry that led to the breakthrough. Almost the reading became qualification that I was onto something. And now I'm a great reader. I love learning every day.
Yeah.
That took a while, actually. But I would suggest that anyone is going through that inquiry for self. Reading is a great place to start. Podcasts are amazing, or inquiry into online education in this space there's plenty out there, and there's a lot available now, which probably wasn't as accessible as it is now 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think there's an endless supply of support that we can take advantage of.
Yeah.
But it was, I was very isolated in my inquiry there for a long time.
I mean, did you have your sister to talk to?
Not straight up, actually. No, she was still going through her own stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it was, it only been a couple of years before me. So we found each other, and that took time to sort of recreate our connection because of what she'd gone through personally, and she was challenged with her own and finding her own way to deal with that. But yeah, my aunt was a great support, actually. She was my dad's sister. She was a really great advocate of my own personal growth.
And was she part of Jehovah's Witness?
No, she wasn't, actually. So she was very much there to check in whether I was okay. But it was really only later that I sought out education, courses and reading that even opened and expanded my mind further. But mostly it was just done alone.
Yeah. It's weird. I started doing work on myself actually through books. We wanted to improve the business, and every time I wanted to learn something, I would pick up a book on a certain subject, and I noticed a reoccurring theme which was, how you have to deal with things and how you have to be okay with things and so that led me down the path of finding books that talked about, yourself and how you can develop yourself, because it's so funny because a business is just a reflection of yourself and how you run that business and how you develop a culture, how you develop, the way you deal with clients or suppliers or key people is how you essentially deal with yourself. So, I read this really good book, and I loved the quote by Wayne Dyer. As much as what's happening is happening, we choose to experience what is happening completely up to us. So you have to be okay with the external factors in life, such as what you went through. And how you deal with it is ultimately going to determine the quality of your life. So, when I first started working with you, you reinforced that for me. How true is it with your client and what you do, especially with, dealing with external factors and be okay with yourself?
I think that's our greatest challenge, isn't it? To find acceptance in, daily life. Yeah. And acceptance is an agreement, which is a big distinction, that we can accept something for what it is because it's not out of our control. It's nothing we can actually touch and affect change. But that seems to suggest if we accept, we sort of surrender on some level and go, it's okay. When in actual fact, we mightn't agree with what is happening. Yeah. A breakdown of a relationship, a loss of a family member, etc. So acceptance is seeing something for what it is. It's all of its color, not arguing with it, and finding peace with where you are in your present life. And our lives are so busy. We're not sort of sitting on a mountain as Buddhist monks, sort of quietly dealing with nothing. We're dealing with a lot, right? So to find that sense of peace from within, to be okay with life, is one thing. I think it's something greater to do if you're the director and producer of your life. It's not just to get acceptance with what is. It's to use what you know to create something better. Yeah, so, most of us have life define us. I want to see people design their lives out of what they've gone through, not be defined by what they've been through. Yeah. So how do we use the information you've gone through? If you find acceptance in it, how do we then use it as a catalyst for greatness? How do we turn it into something not just that you've embraced and got good with, you've actually grown out of it and evolved as a consequence, which I think is a bigger conversation, and that level of direction and production changes a movie.
Do you think your experience with your family has made you a better person?
It's evolved me, yeah. My family has contributed to me on such an extraordinary level, both in who they were for me and who they were not, yeah, which is the design piece. Yeah, I learned a lot about who I wanted to be as a consequence of what I went through, and who I wanted to be for others as a result of what I experienced. So on both sides of that conversation, there's growth. If you can see not only the acceptance and what people have given you or not given you, but you use that information to go, now who do I want to be as a consequence?
Have you accepted your family?
Absolutely. There's only great love.
Was that something that was difficult to accept them for, ostracizing you?
It actually happened really quickly. It was an epiphany of sorts that I went, it was a slap in the face. Excuse the language, but it was, and I'm about to share this story. I was actually had gone to see them to try and challenge them to change their perspective on our relationship. And I was really committed to a breakthrough with them. And I'd done it a few times, actually, sitting there trying to negotiate this change. And drove away from the situation going that they didn't want to change at all. Yeah, they completely was committed to their beliefs and what they knew. And as I was driving away, Jack, I went, what the F? Who are you to go and ask these people to change, which is the very thing they want you to do, but you're not offering the acceptance that you could to them. Yeah. So in actual fact, I was doing exactly the same to them as they were doing to me by asking them to change. And when I got that, I let go. I completely surrendered and accepted and embraced them for who they were in preference to fighting or needing them to change.
Sure.
And it was that moment of a real slap in the face going, really? That's your best work to sit there and try and change somebody?
Yeah.
Or, just accept them the way you want to be accepted yourself and embrace them for who they are and not look for something different about who they are, what they stand for, what they believe.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I completely let go and I didn't argue ever again, actually.
Yeah, wow. That's, that's really amazing ability to do that. And I strongly think anyone can do that. Actually, one of the things that you said to me when we first started working together is, Jack, I remember you saying this to me. You said, Jack, can you control your mum or your dad or anyone in your family or any of your friends? And I said, yes I can.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah. But the truth is you can't control anyone, right? You may want them to do things that you'd like them to do, have certain expectations of what they should be doing, but ultimately you can't control anyone but yourself. So that really hit home for me. And I think in your particular instance, you really understood that. And that's kind of the moment that you accepted them for who they are.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you held that, who loses, right?
Me personally, right? And going back to that acceptance and agreement piece, yeah. In acceptance, I'm not saying I agree with what they did. That just is. Yeah. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad. It is what it is. I'm not going to sign off and go, that was appropriate behavior. But it is the behavior that I'm in a position to accept.
Yeah.
And be good with because they're entitled to choose who they want to be in the world, as we all are. Yeah. Because our control is limited. The capacity to control others is impossible.
Yeah, I can't
always
even control my dog.
Control is your sorry,
I can't even control my dogs.
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah.
You can control your very next thought and your very next action.
Yeah,
that's not much. But if we get empowered with what we think and how we act, how we feel, that can really influence the direction and production of our lives.
So, going back to when you started your practice, how did you put all this into practice? Because the first time you do anything is really raw and rough and like, God, what am I doing? Am I doing it right? You have
like a first podcast.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I think I'm doing okay, I hope.
No, you're doing fantastic. Yeah, so, there must have been a lot of some self-doubt, not a lot, but maybe some self-doubt with, am I doing the right thing? Am I not fucking this person up? Was there any of that thought when you first started?
Interesting, there was a real quiet confidence in it. And the reason I say that isn't because I believed I had the answer. I've never thought for a moment that I'm right and I know better, because I just don't. My sessions are always navigated out of the request or the need or expectation of the client. And if the question is posed of me in such a way, if I check in with, what do you want from this session, Jack? What's the intention? What's the breakthrough you're looking for? What I've always found, if I'm out of ego and drop the need to be right and assume that I know what's best for you, I connect to something greater, which isn't me in context. It's a greater resource of information with the universe or source or whatever you want to call that, that led to a confidence that I didn't own anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been true for me. There's that intuition, that sense of opening myself up to a greater truth that I didn't possess, if you like, that I am only part of, meant I never felt sort of like I wasn't second guessing the quality of the coaching, because I sometimes would even be coaching somebody and they would say, that was amazing. Could you say that again? I go, I couldn't possibly repeat it. It was too good. In fact, I should have written it down too. Because it doesn't always occur like I'm the one with the giving the answer. It's almost something greater happening. So that led to a sense of this isn't me anyhow.
Right. So you felt like that pretty much the
very early, yeah,
very early on.
Yeah.
And I mean that's, and of course over time you got better and better in directing people and leading them to hopefully a breakthrough. With when you help clients, do you ever, because there are some clients that you just go, oh God, I have to see this person again, or you really like this person as as a person, but a lot of times you hear you go to therapy or you go to a psychologist and there's this client-patient bloody boundary, right? Do you ever try and put a boundary, or do you not believe that, or believe that?
A boundary in what respect?
In terms of not getting personally involved or emotionally invested.
That's hard not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that, on some level, I fall in love with all of my clients. There's a real connection and intention to support the change they desire. I'm able to sit on the side of that, and despite my love and commitment, and not necessarily go on the roller coaster ride of where they are.
Yeah.
The only way I've done that, Jack, is I've accepted the version of the person that arrives and the person that leaves. So whoever the person is when they turn up is the person they need to be to get where they want to be. So I don't sit there sort of in trauma or upset or argument about the version of who the individual is, where their life is at presently, because apparently that's exactly where they need to be in this moment. And me adding any further upset or disagreement or you shouldn't be where you are is not going to support anything. So I've got a very clear view of accepting the version of the individual I'm working with consistently, because it takes the person they are to become the person they want to turn into anyhow.
Sure.
So that gradual evolution of an individual is, for me, very exciting. So I don't sort of, as much as my love is present and I'm totally committed to their breakthrough, I don't get caught out by their emotional stuff they're going through in the process.
Yeah, I mean that would be hard, because if you constantly get caught in the emotional side of things with your clients, you would go home and feel absolutely drained, and I'm sure you do from time to time feel that just like come out of a war zone, because I bet you've heard some really interesting stories. And
just a few.
Yeah.
I think that some of the most challenging ones are relationships where I'm working with a couple where I'm completely committed to them individually, and then collectively they've come together to do some work to try and reconcile what they're going through in their relationship. And the challenge of navigating that without taking sides.
Oh, that's hard.
Or, not having an opinion that overrules and comes from ego in a way that doesn't support a breakthrough that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So sitting in that very objective, supporting spot can be a challenge at times. But we get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly helped with my relationship. I look, I'm not afraid to share that. We get help, because ultimately, who loses if you try and be this bravado? No, we don't need help, or keep it behind closed doors. I think nowadays, especially with Gen X and millennials, they're more inclined to talk about their feelings and emotions and mental health than previous generations, where my parents' generation were my parents were very stoic. They always kept it. That's dirty laundry. Don't air your dirty laundry. How are you going to clean your dirty laundry then? And if you keep on using the same methods to try and fix your relationship or to try and improve your relationship, you're not going to get anywhere. because you've tried that before. So I'm all for, seeing people like yourself to improve not just only yourself, but your interaction with others, whether you may be your family, your kids, your parents, whoever. So, I can see that it may be really hard from time to time not to take sides, especially in your instance, because let's face it, you probably met couples where you've just gone, oh God,
Baby Jack, I
have. Has there ever been a client or clients that couldn't have helped? And what was that like?
So I'll go back to that piece I said earlier about not helping people.
Sorry.
It's all good. Breakthroughs are determined by one thing as far as I'm concerned, and that is the quality of someone's intention to change.
Mm.
Yeah, so if someone's really intentional and committed to change, they'll get stuff done. They will absolutely create the breakthroughs they're looking for. So if I meet someone that is not intentional, and at times I work for corporates where they're referring leaders in who should do some work with me, and I'm very quick to qualify whether they're actually intentional enough to change. Do they desire the change? Yeah, because that's going to be wasting my time and their time and the company's money just doing work on someone that should be potentially, heading a different direction or finding a different form of growth. So I don't work with people that are not intentional. And if I observe someone over time who's not intentional enough, I've actually gone, let's just not do this. Because I don't think it serves them to just be in a place where they're being challenged to change, but don't desire to change. Yeah. But I think the consistent client base I have and the referrals that turn up are generally people that are ready. The timing seems to be right. They're up for it. They choose it, and it makes it really easy because their change is determined by them.
Mm. So there's never been one instance where you've said, can't help you?
Oh, there's been a few.
Oh, right.
Sack clients, if you like. Yeah.
So
this is not going to work. Let's just not do this.
Mm. And you don't see that as a failure, obviously, from yourself.
No.
You just see that as they're not ready.
Yeah, it's timing.
Mm.
They could be ready in 5 years, but they're not ready at the time.
Yeah.
So let's just not push for change that isn't naturally available.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I bring this up is because obviously there's listeners out there that have clients, and whether it may be whatever kind of clients they have, especially if you're in the services industry. Well, actually, it doesn't. Any industry. And the client turns around and goes, no, I don't want to use you anymore, or not winning a client, So it's, for a lot of people, that would be hard to deal with. I know certainly it was hard for me to deal with when I first started in business, having put so much work and effort into a particular client or potential client, and only for them to turn around and say, nah, or don't even get back to you, right? So, a lot of people like me took that personally. So, it's only really when you, I guess, are completely okay with yourself that you don't take that personally. Would you say that's kind of the case?
Yeah, I never see it as slight on me if someone chooses not to work with me. I'm not everyone's coach, right?
Mm.
My methodology and style isn't for every individual. Thank God it's not, because it's far too busy, busy enough. And everyone deserves the right to find that unique experience, that person, that moment. And if I'm not it, I'm good with that.
Has anyone ever challenged you in your? Must be.
Oh,
must
constantly. Yeah, on a daily basis. Yeah, which is appropriate. I think people should totally be skeptical, not cynical, not resigned to nothing is impossible, they can't change. But great skepticism is really important. I mean, that's the only reason I do what I do, is I ask questions, and I was a skeptic of what I'd learned. Mm. Yeah, so when I get challenged, I'm like, bring it. That's important, because they shouldn't just sign off on what they hear as an answer. They need to challenge that for themselves because it's the only way it's going to work for them.
Yeah. So when you work with corporate clients, right? You know, there would have been so many times where you walked into a company and, you know, this is something the management or a manager or an owner has said, yes, we're going to do this because it's really of great value. And some of the employees, you know, that may or may not have done work, especially the ones that haven't, would just gone, oh God, you know, here's another gimmick or another just BS, right? Like, because a lot of people see therapists and mental health stuff as fluff. So when you sit down with some of those people, because they have to sit down, and instantly, you know, they have a wall up. How difficult is it for you to like crack through the wall? And do you crack through it?
Yes and no. Yeah. I think the only way to get close to someone is get connected to their story and their life and their reality. Yeah. And encourage them to question and challenge things, and not fight that, not resist that.
Yeah.
Because I go, that's going to serve them. However, if there's such a wall to their personal change, as I spoke to earlier about their intention isn't to change, I'm quick to go, let's just not do this. Yeah. I'm not going to demand that someone grow, evolve, be pushed into a spot where they just, you know, feel obligated to do something that their, you know, company's asked of them or they think I'm asking of them. So if I really felt someone was unavailable, I would be unavailable too.
Yeah, right. I guess that's the best way to deal with it. Yeah, so look, you know, going back to you helping some clients, of course they would go through really hard things in their life. And is it the satisfaction when they have a breakthrough that keeps you doing from what you do? Or, you know, because here's the thing, right? Like, you're okay if they don't have a breakthrough and you're okay if they do have a breakthrough. But what's the point otherwise?
Does acceptance have a point? You know, I'm not looking for the breakthrough per se, like that has to happen. I desire it. I choose it too. I choose what you want for you and back you to create it. However, it doesn't always happen in the way that the person would have wanted it to happen. You know, I've worked with people that really want to break through in their relationship, and the breakthrough ends up being it completes, it finishes. Yeah, it has no life left in it. Yeah, which is not what they really wanted, but it ends up being the end result. So sure, I'm bought into and desire the result, but if someone has internally changed and done the work, and that leads to an outcome that is better for them long term, it's not found in the moment. As far as my role to that, or my, you know, relationship, that is, I've done my very best by them to support the breakthrough they're looking for, but it mightn't happen today. But who they've become for themselves will undoubtedly create that with time.
Well, that's really inspiring. How does this affect your personal relationships?
What, being a coach?
Yeah, because look, I just remember. Obviously, I can only compare my story. I just remembered when I first started doing work on myself, I started feeling, holy shit, you know, I had distinctive moments of, you know, the pin has dropped. I'm like, holy shit, I've been doing this for the last however many years. I've been running the same sort of thought patterns and circles and all this other stuff, right? And it became a real challenge in my then relationship or relationships moving forward, because I'm like, well, why the hell can't you just, you know, be okay with yourself? And then later on, I realized, well, that's still me needing more work to do, because if I don't just be okay with however they react or however, you know, they responded, then I haven't done enough work. So let me ask you this. how do you deal with your relationships? Because I think I posed this question to you before, but how do you deal with it when someone you meet isn't someone that you're looking for? But wouldn't you just be okay with it because you're okay with yourself?
It's an ironic piece, right? The interesting thing about being a coach is the assumption would be that I expect a lot from others. The truth is the opposite. Yeah, I don't actually. I accept people for who they are. So if I'm in a relationship with someone or it's a friendship or family, I'm not sitting there going, God, I should change this up. I see them for who they are and accept them for who they are. So that it's almost the opposite. It can almost be their internal dialogue about self has it be that their assumption would be that I am looking at them and going, well, there's a lot of work going on over there. Got some cleaning up to do. But actual fact, I'm going, they're perfect and whole and complete just the way they are. And my responsibility is to choose them for who they are or who they're not and go, either we're in friendship or we're in relationship based on what I know without a need for you to change or an expectation for you to change.
And is that hard for you to find someone that, you connect and bond with?
As a consequence, yes, because they're almost an assumption would be then that they can't see that for me. That I'm in that place.
Yeah.
Going, you're okay. It's all good. So that can be a challenge, particularly when it comes to dating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever want kids?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
How hard is it? You don't have kids, assuming.
No.
How hard is it? Has it been for you through your line of work and your relationships to not have the kids that you wanted?
It's always one of those, that piece that's missing in my life. So, I've done a very good job of designing my life out of what I went through to recreate and direct and produce an outcome that I really want for myself.
Sure.
Part of that was children. It's a bit of a challenge when in a relationship with a guy. It doesn't just have happened naturally. However, I've embraced other ways to express that. So I have 4 godchildren, which I totally spoil and hang out with a lot. So, when family and friends have got kids and I'm part of their lives, it's the way I've used that or shared that desire is by actually being part of their life as well. Doesn't change the fact that desire's still there.
Given the opportunity, obviously you would love to have kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, you can just get more dogs like I did.
I know, right? Got the dog and the cat already. Sorted on that one.
Yeah. So, well, I think you're doing really great work, and I think you definitely help a lot of people change their lives. And I thank you, and I'm so grateful for meeting you, and especially for helping me, professionally, personally, and in my relationship, all 3. And I've learned, a great deal amount from you, and also from some of the books that I've read, and from other people that I've gone out to. I think what look for me, what I think your psychology or your method is really part of, from what I've studied, anyways, is really part of the new age psychology. Right? There's a few schools of thought with psychology, especially in the new age. You have NLP. You have another gentleman called DeMartini, the DeMartini method, which is looking at positives and negatives of whatever happens in your life, right? So, if something happened that's amazing for you, there's also always drawbacks of that. And it's good to not, get carried away on the drawbacks and also the positive of whatever happened. Then obviously your own method that you've come up with, which I find greatly beneficial. And it's so different to traditional psychology, right? The traditional psychology I find really slow in actually helping. I'm not trying to say it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's slower, right? Like And I found that with some of the stuff that with some of the work that you helped me with, I was able to, really clear up some of my my past, and really have a great life moving forward. Just because I've seen it from another perspective. So, what's your one, piece of advice for anyone who wants to look into developing themselves?
I think we live in a really interesting time where we're so in our physiology, we're so in our bodies
Mm.
and looking good and social media and all the stuff that speaks to that,
Oh, absolutely.
is for me interesting because we're physical, mental, and emotional beings. We're three parts. And the time, money, and energy we'll submit to who we are physically is very important in the day and age we live. Yeah. So is our mind. People are very interested in learning, getting the right education. But to be aligned emotionally, actually work on self on a really deep level from within is, is resisted, not exactly accepted potentially. The interesting thing about that for me is this: the nature of who we are physically and mentally and emotionally is this. Physically, with time we fade. A few more wrinkles, grey hair, might be quite as pretty as we once were. We might be quite as sharp as we were once upon a time, mentally even, potentially.
Mm.
The only part of us that can consistently expand and grow and get lighter and brighter is our emotions.
Mm.
It needn't fade in any context,
Yeah.
but it's the thing we work on least.
Yeah, it's so true you say this, because I've always wondered why, we spend so much money on physical health, right? Like, we spend money at the gym, personal trainer, sport. I know I do. I spend thousands of dollars on crap that I use a couple of times, and like, when was the last time someone spent $1,000 on a treadmill, or like a bunch of money, especially during COVID, building a home gym, and then all of a sudden go, yeah. But for most people, if you think, when was the last time I spent any money, or the equal amount of money, or um, the same amount of the same amount of money on mental health, or mental health, because mentally that drives everything. Your mental health and your emotional intelligence and your emotional well-being drives
Everything that we are.
everything that you are.
So I find that piece really relevant. That's my constant reminder to people that you are in a position to change up who you are mentally and emotionally if you do the work. You make that an investment. If you prioritize it as something that's important to you. And I submit, as we all know but forget, that everything that we create in reality was first a thought. So everything in this room, everything in technology, the furniture, etc. Someone had to think it up. And thoughts, along with feelings, the passion, the desire, the interest, the emotional reaction to those thoughts, those ideas, is what eventually, with action, creates reality. So thinking and feeling and action create outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever you're thinking and feeling is just a little bit relevant, because it's going to totally impact the reality, right?
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my message is to consistently check in with the quality of what your thoughts are, the quality of what your feelings are.
Yeah.
Because that's the real work.
Yep.
And that's the expansion of you that can ongoingly affect change in your life if you do the work.
It's so true, Craig. So true. And I think there was a really good quote. I can't remember who said it. It is, the quality of your thoughts determine the quality of your life. And it's funny. I always, because I mentor some business owners on how to improve their business. And one of the analogies I always bring up is, if I put you in a room and say to you, don't look at the scary clown in the corner of the room, what are you going to do? You're going to look at the bloody clown in the corner of the room. So it doesn't matter on what thoughts you have, it eventually turns into reality. So, for a long time, I did this, right? I always said I didn't want to be like my father. He cheated on my mum when I was I think around about 7 or 8 months old. And then I've never seen him again. He, was just non-present, and he was this and that and whatever may be. But I've always said I don't want to be like my father. I don't want to be like my father. I don't want to be like my father. And ultimately, what happens is you become like that person because you're thinking about that person rather than concentrating on what you want to be. And I realized actually when I met you is that you helped me point me in the right direction in saying, hey, maybe focus on who you actually want to be, because it's not common for people to sit down and go, okay, I want to be a better person. I want to be less this. I want to be more of that. I want to be so. It's super important to check in on the quality of your thoughts, as you said, because really it does eventually turn up in your life. So I really thank you for coming in today for our chat. I see you frequently, and I'm sure we'll have a chat about other things in the future. But for people who at home who want to reach you, how do we reach you? Do you have a website? I think it's
Yep.
I'll let you.
So my website is Journey Home, which is my business name.
Yep.
All my contact details there. I've got a practice in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Presently, there's a lot of phone sessions happening in preference to in person.
Yeah.
As a result of COVID, but all of my details are available there.
Fantastic, and that's a journeyhome.com.au.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure, Jack.